Okay. Hi, everyone. We're gonna give it a little, like a couple minutes, maybe start around 6:02, just to give people a couple minutes to join in. But yeah. Okay, I think we're gonna get started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Danielle Sappho. I'm a third-year medical student here at the OU-SCM. Today, for our Catalyst workshop, we will be doing a Catalyst Mastering the AMCAS application and personal statement. Before we begin, I just want to acknowledge some of our Catalyst team that's in the Zoom room today. We have our coordinator, Danielle. She's probably, or Danny, she emails you guys and speaks to you more. She's here waving. And then we have another med student, part of our Catalyst mentor, Zach Arnold. He's also a third year. And then Emily as well, our second year Catalyst mentor. And then there he is. Okay. We will go ahead and get started. Feel free to type in the chat if you have any questions during the PowerPoint, or you can unmute and go ahead and ask your question. The format for this workshop is I'll go through this PowerPoint as an overview of the application for the AMCAS and then what the personal statement looks like. At the end, me and the two other medical students in the Zoom meeting will just answer your questions. Okay, so we will go ahead and get started. Okay, so just as a big overview of the application for this upcoming cycle to start medical school in 2026, the application opens on May 1st of 2025. With applications, there is a primary application, and then each additional school that you add is additional money. So the primary AMCAS application is a fee of $175, and that covers one school. So if you were to just apply to one school, that would be that baseline fee. Each additional school after that you apply to is $45 additional. Submission to your AMCAS application begins on May 28th of 2025. So you can open it and start working on it on May 1st, and then the first day to submit is that May 28th. Schools will not start processing or looking at your applications until June 25th. And so some students kind of just wait during that May 28th to June 25th to kind of keep working on their application because schools are not going to look through your application until that date. Processing means the schools or the system looks through your application to ensure that everything's accurate for schools to then be able to look at it. Part of the AMCAS application is split up into a primary application of what we just talked about and a secondary application. Secondary applications is where the schools take over. Each school typically will send you what's called a secondary letter or essay questions that are typically 2 to 3. It could be one essay question just to give more information about yourself, something that they're interested in knowing about you. Maybe they ask more about like how do you align with their mission statement, just anything school specific essay. These secondary applications range from an additional $50 to $150. Okay. So to give a broad overview of the different sections of the application, it starts off with personal information. This is just the demographic area. It'll ask you name, address, and just any demographic information about yourself. The next, they ask about academic history. So this is where you would put all the schools or universities you've attended. So if you did some courses at a community college, you would also put that school there as well. Coursework is where you manually insert the course number that you see for your college courses and then the letter grade. This part can get a little complicated, but there are a lot of videos on the actual AMCAS website to show you how to do that. But essentially, the course number, for instance, a third year course in chemistry or whatever would be 300 or 3000 and so on. And you would put 30, whatever the course number is, and then the letter grade that you got in that course. The next section is the work and activities section. This is where you have an opportunity to share the extracurriculars activities that you've worked on. This is a section that we'll spend a little bit more time on in this PowerPoint. You have an opportunity to list up to 15 activities. You don't have to use all of those 15 spaces, but using a majority is pretty typical. There are 3 where you are allowed to put 3 meaningful activities where you're given an opportunity to say more on those, how that impacted you more, and we'll talk about that in a later slide. The next section are letters of recommendation. These are any letters from maybe someone you've shadowed or professors. There are information within the AMCAS application on where to submit those. A lot of students have their letters also submitted on a third-party source, but for me, I'm not sure about the third party, but I just followed the instructions on the AMCAS website for my professors and the people I shadowed to send their letters directly to AMCAS, which I felt was easier. The next section is the medical school list. So this is where you would add the schools, the MD schools for the AMCAS application that you want to apply for. The next section is your personal statement. And so this is your why. Why do you want to become a doctor? This is also something we're going to spend a little bit more time on today, because I know a lot of people have questions on the format and what that looks like and how to make an impact on your personal statement. The next section is the standardized test scores. With this one, I don't believe you manually do anything with those. With the MCAT and stuff like those automatically go into your application. So I don't think you have to manually do anything on that section. So to go kind of deeper into that work and activities section, this is where you're highlighting all your experiences that you did in college. Like I said, it's up to 15 opportunities to talk about clinical, leadership stuff, research, volunteering, etc. You can also put jobs that you've had. You have 15 opportunities to do that. And then you have three entries where you can promote one of those 15 as the most meaningful. They allow you 1,325 characters each for those. So essentially, you give more space to talk about those most meaningful experiences. I wanted to go over an example of what a standard meaningful activity looks like. This one is a little longer, so this one could be an example of the most meaningful one. This is an example I found online. It is a student that was a peer mentor for an undergraduate pre-meds. One thing I will suggest is when they see your activities section, it's great to start out with a story or just something meaningful because typically they know what a mentor is. And so, how can you introduce that in a meaningful way? So, for this one, it started as I stood in front of a group of eager pre-meds. During our first mentorship session, I remembered my own journey, how intimidating the application process had felt without guidance. This memory fueled my determination to create a supportive environment. Over the course of the year, I led weekly workshops on application strategies, facilitated mock interviews, and helped mentees craft compelling personal statements. One of my mentees, a first generation college student, shared how she felt overwhelmed navigating the medical school application process. Today, we identified her unique experiences and translated them into a powerful narrative. Seeing her confidence grow and her acceptance letter arrive was deeply rewarding. Through this role, I honed my communication leadership skills while making a tangible impact on the next generation of future physicians. So this one's more tailored to specific med school and like how he got accepted and then helped other students get accepted. But this is just an example of how he was able to tell his experience through a story while also saying everything that he did as a mentor. So that's just an example of how to kind of format yours. To talk more about the personal statement, this is an opportunity where students are given the space to provide an explanation of why do you want to go to medical school. It is a pretty broad question, and I think that's where a lot of people get more intimidated about. But following kind of a good structure will help you get started in that process. They give you 5,300 characters, including spaces to write. That's about 850 to 1,000 words. So not a lot, but a good amount to say why you want to go to medical school. Structures for personal statements can vary. It can look a lot of different ways. I think most commonly what I found was the structure that I have here that I can go over. Um, I think it's important to highlight more stories and more impact in your personal statement versus regurgitating some of the activities. I think it's important not to necessarily re-mention something you've already said in your other parts of your application unless it was very meaningful and impacted your reason for wanting to go to medical school. So just a common structure of a personal statement is starting with that introduction. That first paragraph or that first sentence is going to be the first picture of who you are that the school is going to read. So a good start would be like a compelling book. So you can share a story or a moment that sparked your interest in medicine. What was that one moment, or what's a most recent moment that you can think of that relates to why you decided to go to medical school? That can be your first intro paragraph. The body part of your personal statement can highlight 2 to 3 meaningful experiences that kind of correlate to the story that you said above or that kind of shape the path. This can be without reiterating your experiences in the past section, the clinical exposure, the research, the challenges. You can mention it, but it wouldn't be necessarily regurgitation of the explanation you've already said in the other section. So this is your opportunity to kind of expand more on it, show the growth that you had, the skills, the values, anything that you gained in those experiences while also tying everything back to that initial spark that you had. A good conclusion is continuing to reflect on those experiences you mentioned in your body paragraph and solidify your commitment and readiness for a career in medicine. A lot of schools like to see, through your experiences, you took the opportunity to engage with medicine, whatever that looked like. and you found ways to spark that interest in your activities. How did you connect to your future goals? Again, highlighting those activities or just personal information. You don't necessarily have to talk about the activities that you did in college, but I think it is an easy way to tie back to that initial story or that initial spark. It's always good to keep it personal, very concise and focused. You do only have about 1,000 words to talk about it, so you don't want to go on tangents about one specific thing, but to keep it very personal, making sure you're sticking to the point. Okay, why do I want to go to medical school? And while you're reading it, making sure that you're answering that question. Just to go over a lot of frequently asked questions. I know that was a big, broad overview, but I wanted to leave a lot of room for questions, specific questions that you guys have. But a lot of questions we typically get when it comes to the application are letters of recommendation first. How many letters? Does it matter who? Things like that. Just looking in and from my own experience, typically 3 to 5 letters is a good amount. It can depend on each school, and each school may have a requirement on what type of letters they want. And so be mindful of that. I believe I had 3 professors and maybe one physician that I shadowed. And so I mixed those. You don't necessarily have to do that. I think it's a good idea if you did research, maybe get a letter from your research. If you spend a lot of time with the physician and you feel like they know you or you connected, that would be someone great to speak on you. And professors are always great. It doesn't necessarily have to be from a science professor as well. I think that's a unique quality if you get a letter from someone that isn't science, but be aware that some schools do require a science letter, and some schools may also require a physician's letter as well. So just paying attention to those requirements there. Can I submit letters after I apply? Yes, you can submit letters after you apply. Um, there's instructions on the actual website on where those letters are submitted, and you would typically just give your submitters that link. All they have to do is press the link or whatever it is and submit that letter there. And so once you provide all of that information, you just kind of have to make sure that, yes, they did it, yes, they've sent it. Regarding timeline and deadlines, what is verification? So verification is that process where the MCAS compares your submitted coursework with your official transcripts. When we went over that broad overview of the sections of the AMCAS, there was a part where you submit in your coursework where we talked about. You're also going to submit your transcript. And so that verification or going over your application part is looking and making sure that those number of courseworks matches up with your transcripts, the letter grades matches up. The better that you take your time in doing that, the faster it's verified and the faster the schools are able to look at your application. So it's a good idea to really take your time on that part. I think mistakes mostly come from that section, but like I said, there are videos and steps on how to do that, and we can also help you as well. How late can I submit my application? Deadlines vary by school, but submitting early is always a good idea. You do want to be at the top of the kind of stack of applications they have because most schools do like a rolling basis on who they're asking for interviews. And so you do want to be at the beginning of that. And so, like we talked about, verification and processing starts at that June date. And so schools often start looking through that during that time and start sending interview invites August, September, October-ish. And so you want to make sure you're kind of submitting in that time frame. It's not like you won't get an interview if you submit after that, but obviously your chances are higher if you submit before that. Okay. Now is a good time to have, if you have any questions about the application. I know that was kind of just a broad overview. I wanted to make sure I was kind of highlighting the important parts. But if you have any questions, you're free to ask. You can just type them in the chat as well if you feel more comfortable doing that. But myself and then Zach and then Emily will also be answering questions for you if you have any. So the first one, do all students who apply get a secondary application or is it first cut of step? As far as I know, every student that applies to a medical school gets a secondary application. Um, so yeah, one tip that I learned during that process is that I would email the school and say, and ask essentially if they could cover my secondary application cost. That was that $50 to $150 cost. And so it's worth a try just emailing them and saying, hey, like, is there a way that you can cover that secondary application cost? And most of my applications were covered, just asking. So that's also a tip. But yes, every school will provide a um, secondary application. How early do you suggest asking for letters of recommendation? Um, I think for me, for physicians, I asked after I was shadowing them more often because I think I shadowed more during my sophomore and junior year, not really my senior year, and I knew I wouldn't as much during my senior year. So I think after my junior year, I asked them if they could write me a letter so they would have it and kind of remember me. Professors, it kind of depended when I had that class. And so I would ask automatically after I finished that class instead of waiting. Um, and then have them keep in mind, either have them keep in mind like they need to write a letter for you and submit it on that third party source that I'm not too sure about, or have them write it, keep it in mind, and then when the application opens, you can give them the link to submit it. And then I don't know. Did you guys do anything different regarding that?
No, I think that's what I did. I definitely recommend like the sooner in your process that you can ask, the better. Because
Mhm.
the last thing you want to do is have your application submitted and be like, hey, have you done it yet? Hey, have you done it yet? And like feel like you're really annoying them because you didn't ask early enough and now like you feel like everything is holding up. But and like she said, like you can submit your application without having the letters, but like your application is not complete until you have everything on there. So having everything submitted as timely as possible is really beneficial. So the sooner you can ask, the better. Also, just a note on letters of recommendation, if anybody plans to apply to a DO school, I know most DO schools require at least one letter from a DO physician. So just keep that in mind if that's something you're planning on doing.
Mhm.
I think for my experience at OU, it's been a couple years. I think if you get the letter early, you can have it sent to the pre-med advising office and they will like hold it until you apply. So if you get it like sophomore year from a professor, they can hold it those 2 years and then we'll upload it with your other letters.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a good one. So kind of check back in with your advisors and see, because that's a good way to keep them. Um, okay. So is there an advantage in submitting your application before June 25th? I think when I submitted, it's been a while, but I submitted before that date. Like I submitted the date applications the first day it was open to submit. So that May like 25th or something like that. I just thought it gave me the best chance in, I don't know. I don't really know if there's a super big advantage in submitting before the June 25th one. Maybe they can speak to it, but I think obviously the earlier the better, but I don't know between that timeline specifically.
The June 25th is when the schools first get them, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, I think the only benefit is you get like a 1 month vacation and not having to worry about it.
Right, yeah. So I don't think there's anything necessarily worth doing it. If you finish it, great. Go ahead and submit if you feel like you're ready to, but also don't feel pressure because they're not going to look at it until June 25th. What things, if any, should you not include in an application? This can be case by case. I think this probably hints to maybe if you're talking about any red flags, but I don't know. It might be case by case if you have an example. But if there's something that maybe happened, maybe it was grades wise, I think it's case by case if you want to talk about it in your personal statement, but don't make it your whole entire personal statement. Just kind of make it a little couple of sentences. I've heard that's a good idea. But I think if grades were an issue and you showed an upward trend, I think that also speaks for itself. So I think it is case by case. If you want to ever contact us separately and kind of ask, or individually or privately, we can give you more on that. I don't know. Do you guys have an idea of like anything specific you wouldn't add? Yeah,
I'd say anything you don't want to talk about during your interview,
that's a good one.
because there is a very solid chance it will be brought up. And so if it's something you're not passionate about, have a good, like, you have to be able to talk about it. You put it in there. So keep that
Mhm.
in mind.
Yeah. So if it was like some extracurricular that you did for a little bit, maybe during sophomore year or something like that, and you decided to put on your application, that's fine. But also be ready to explain what it was and have a full explanation because they can go into detail about it, and you want to have, information about what it was. Does anyone have prior experience applying to schools in Texas? I have heard that it's its own separate process, and I was wondering if there's anything I need to keep in mind. Yes, I applied to a couple Texas schools. Their application is very separate. Overall, I think the biggest differences is their word limit on their work and activities is different. I think they ask two more additional questions separate from the personal statement. At least that's from my experience. They may have changed that. And then it is different costs. And so you're paying for a whole separate primary application and then whole separate secondary applications. And so it's a whole different situation. You're going to have to ask for the letters of recommendation separate to be sent there. And so I think the biggest thing is being prepared for the extra essays, the different word counts, be aware of that. Some schools may require different requirements for what type of recommendation letters. Yeah, I think that's all specifically. Um, if you shadowed multiple doctors, should they be grouped together or listed as separate activities? I think for me, I just did as one activity. So I said shadowing, and then I put in, I think I shadowed three doctors, and I did about 1 to 2 sentences about my experience with each doctor. I don't think it's worth using your 15 for like different things. I don't know if you can even do that, but I would just say one shadowing as one of your 15. And then if you shadow multiple or multiple have had an impact on you, say a couple sentences on each in that one. Okay. Can you or should you include non-medical related jobs in your activities if you can relate it to leadership for improving interpersonal skills? I definitely think that's a good idea. I was a tutor, and so that wasn't necessarily medical-ish. It still had to do with school, but I know other people had jobs and they definitely included it. There's no harm in including it. I think it's actually, it'll look good on you. Okay. How do professors know how to submit the letters of recommendations and how does it go to your personal application? So on the actual application, there are instructions on how those are submitted to your specific application. And like Zach was saying, I think you can contact your advisor if you go to OU specifically to hold those and they'll help you submit those directly to your application. But all the instructions are on the actual application and they make it easy to where you give the link or instructions of however they do it to the professor or to whoever, and they follow those instructions and send it on their own. So it's you just providing whatever instructions the MCAS gave you, giving it to them, and they handle it from there. Mhm. Can you also submit a letter, a DO for the MD application? Um, I don't think you can't. I don't know of a situation that a student has. I don't know if you guys. I don't think it's worth doing. I think if you apply to DO schools, definitely add that there. I'm not too sure on that. I don't think it would harm you in any way if you were to. But if you can, maybe save the MD the letter for the MD application and the DO one for the DO application. I think that would be my most highlighted, but I don't think it would harm you in any way if you decided to do, or if your only letter from a physician was from a DO applicant to turn into the MD one. They might ask you about it, which could be interesting, but just kind of have an answer prepared, maybe.
I did submit a DO letter to MD schools and it was never an issue.
Yeah,
So I also submitted an MD letter. I submitted an MD and a DO letter, but nobody ever said anything about them having an issue with it. So I think it's probably an issue.
perfect. Okay. Also, should I try to take up every spot for the 15 experiences? Should I only include things that I feel like are super important, even though I might not take up, or I only will take up 8? I from my experience, I filled up 15, but I think I heard from somewhere that including up to 10 to 15 is a good amount. I don't know. Did you guys fill your whole 15?
I think I had 9,
9. Okay.
and my three most meaningful, and then like 6 others, and then it
Yeah.
was getting to like check the box area and not like something I wanted to talk about or was important. So I
Okay.
think quality over quantity, but have enough quantity as well.
Hmm. That's a good one. Yeah. If you definitely don't have 15, that's not bad. Like Zach said, definitely quality. Um, if you have 8 and they're really good 8, that would be better than having 15 fluff. So yeah, include what's super important to you and that you can really talk about in the application and on the interview, because that's what they most likely ask about, that and the personal statement stuff. Mm. Is there a general rule of thumb for when to send back secondary applications? Like, should it be done ASAP or is there leniency? Also, I'm sure it varies by school. Just wanted your advice. I think the standard is within 2 weeks. I don't know who came up with that, if that's a school thing, but I think everyone does it's a good idea to do within 2 weeks. So I remember I applied to quite a bit, and they sent a lot of secondary applications all at once. And so I had a bunch of different essay questions to do for each school. So I think when I got one, I would do one question a day. And so if, for instance, a school sent me 3 questions in 3 days, I was done. And I would do that for each application. And so, say I had like 6 secondary applications to work on. I was only working on 6 essays, but I was working on 6 different schools. So just a general rule of thumb, I think 2 weeks is pretty good just to have a good timeline. Yeah.
Yeah, I think definitely like don't blow it off like as soon as you can. Because that's also like they'll start doing interviews, and if you're doing DO and MD, those schedules are not like aligned, right? They don't consider each other when they're scheduling interviews. So, and then also, I kind of like pre-wrote some of my secondaries. Like you can definitely like the concepts that they ask are very similar across schools, so you can find those online and pre-write like rough draft if you want, um, just to kind of make that process easier.
I agree.
Yeah. And just on that too is like making your application complete involves your secondary. So for them to consider you for the interview, like your secondary has to be in. So just the sooner you can do that, the better. And like Zach said, a lot of them are going to be very similar. So hopefully you can just tweak some of the best ones you've written and it apply to a lot of schools.
Yes. Great. So next question, if you've attended conferences to present research, would you file that as a separate activity or just talk about it in your research activity? Um, Maybe our other students have experience in this. I don't think I presented in college, but if I were to guess, I would do it in that same section. I don't think I would make it in a different, yeah. Yeah, so overall, just kind of put it in that same, if you talk about research in one of your 15, talk about that research and say, I've also presented at so and so and did this. Mm. And then we did have some questions, kind of direct message, like the best time to take the MCAT. It kind of depends when you want to start med school. If you want to start medical school right after college, then you want to start taking your MCAT your junior year because you'll be applying for medical school your senior year and start right after your senior year. If you want to take one gap year, then you would take your MCAT during your senior year and so on. So it depends essentially when you want to take your or when you want to enter into medical school, kind of timing that out because the application process is a year-long process. And so taking the MCAT close to that timeline.
Also note that MCAT scores do expire. So if you just want to take the MCAT because you want to see how you'll do and you just want to keep that score, just keep in mind that they do expire. And I think it's actually different for some schools how old of a score they'll accept. So I think it's like between 2 and 3 years, depending on where you want to apply. So just keep that in mind.
And yes, Danny reminded us there's a workshop in January about the MCAT as well. So all those questions will be answered again in there. So that will be a good one to attend. Do you have any tips on how to write the 15 activities in a way that would boost the application? Um, at least for me, specifically on the three most meaningful, I started with a story and then went into why it was impactful. For the other ones that weren't my most meaningful, when you had a little bit of shorter word count, I think I just used one sentence to introduce what the activity was and then went into why it was impactful. I think making it as personal as possible and not just using that whole information to explain what it is, because I think it's a lot of the times it's self-explanatory, but just giving a little insight, that one sentence, and then the rest is what did you do specifically? For instance, if you were a mentor or if you were a tutor, you can explain what you tutored or what you mentored in as that first sentence, and then after that, kind of explain what that meant, what did you get to teach, who were you impacting, kind of things like that. But also, we can go ahead and put our contact information in the chat for you all if you have questions after this and you want to just ask through there. We can put our email or phone numbers.
Danielle or Danny, are we doing an interview workshop? Okay, is that planned? All right.
Yes, we usually do it in the summer, but I think we might be doing some practice interviewing some other time. But I'm not exactly sure right off the top of my head, but I do know we have some interview um stuff coming up. Give me 1 second. Let's see here. So in April, we'll be doing preparing for the interview, and throughout the month of April, we'll be giving people opportunities to register for mock interviews. So that'll be a really good opportunity. Check out our website. We have our whole workshop schedule for the coming year on the Catalyst website, and just keep an eye on social media too.
I'll go ahead and leave this open for maybe like 5, 10 minutes. If you guys have questions, feel free to ask. If you don't, feel free to head out, but contact us if you have any other questions at a later point. But I hope you guys learned a lot during this time. We will be here. Look at the website for any other workshops you want to attend as well. We are always available for your questions. Yeah. Thank you guys. Okay, I think that was our last one. Thank you guys so much for
I Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
you're good. I was just saying thank
Sorry.
you. Oh, you're good.
Thank you. I'm saying thank you. I'm so sorry.
Thank you
Thank you
guys.
so
You guys did amazing. This
much.
was perfect.
You really stepped in and helped out, and wow, you saved us. So thank you so much. You guys are amazing.
Seriously.
I like
Yeah.
it. I don't mind doing it again.
Mm-mm.
Awesome. We'll remember that, Danielle.
Bye,
Guys have a good night.
Yeah. Thank you all. Have a good night.
guys.
Uh,
Bye.